To Ukraine. And on Monday, Brian just briefly mentioned the attack in Sevastopol, but let's have a look at this in a little bit more detail. Now, this is the Telegraph's coverage of it. Crimean sunbathers struck by deadly shrapnel. Well, we'll look at the video clip in a second, and Vanessa, maybe you'll have a comment to make about whether it's, or maybe Charles, about whether it's shrapnel or not. This was CNN's coverage. At least 5 dead after missile fragments scatter over beachgoers in Russian-occupied Crimea. So let's just have a look at sorry, I do apologize. I've a bit trigger happy there with my finger. Let's have it. Yeah, we're having trouble today. Let's go back one and try again. Okay, you will see these things coming down. And Charles, I don't know, that looks more like just shrapnel. That looks like explosions taking place.
It does, absolutely, Mike. Yeah. It's very hard to believe that it would be fragments. I mean, it supposes a detonation in sort of, well, I mean, it's hard to see how that could be a detonation that would result in fragments landing exactly like that. So I don't see that's credible at all. I really don't.
Thank you. So basically, this looks like a cluster munition that's been used, but let's bring Matthew Miller on from the State Department. You've seen this a couple of times already, so apologies for that. I'll just tell you what the ambassador said when she met with the Russian Foreign Ministry, and that is, of course, that we lament any civilian loss of life in this war. Yeah, well, we believe him there, don't we? We provide weapons to Ukraine, he said, so it can defend its sovereign territory against armed aggression. He went on to say that includes in Crimea, which of course is part of Ukraine, and Russia should stop Russia could stop this war today and end the suffering caused by the war in Russia, by the war Russia launched today, if it would stop its occupation of sovereign Ukrainian territory and stop launching attacks on civilians. He went on to say, I don't have any assessment of the underlying attack, including who was responsible for it, but I will say you've seen Russia make ridiculous claims about responsibility in the past. It's not unusual for the government of Moscow to make ridiculous hyperbolic claims about responsibility that aren't borne out by any fact. The hypocrisy here is off the charts. But anyway, of course, what's he referring to? Russia absolutely clear that these weapons could not have been fired without US help. They are US supplied weapons. They are cluster munitions. Now, in TASS, they quote the EU as saying pretty much the same thing. They're saying that there's the EU claiming that there's zero credibility that the US was involved in targeting this. The Russians themselves say the use of US supplied ATACMS missiles will be discussed at the next regular briefing on Ukraine, which will be held in July, as we do every month. But Vasily Nebenzia here saying, they are absolutely claiming that these are US supplied and therefore US targeted weapon systems. This is from Italy, this particular report, and we'll do a quick translation on what it says here. So the headline is Russian attrition continues. Italy is right to talk about negotiations. But actually in this article, it quotes an Italian military expert and director of a particular organization that's qualified in these areas. I won't try to pronounce the name. I'm sorry, you'll have to look in the article to see that. This person is quoted as saying the use of these weapons involves extensive US technical support. They're used with HIMARS launchers, and the attack is brought forward by a drone flying over the Black Sea. Drones take off from a Sicilian base at Sigonella and act as scouts and missile guidance. And he went on to say the US may have redeployed them from Greece. However, their main headquarters is in Italy, in Sigonella. They're long-range strategic reconnaissance drones called Global Hawk. So that's what's in the Italian media. In the meantime, here is the United Nations position on this from the UN Human Rights Office. Elizabeth Throssell here saying, while cluster munitions are not per se prohibited under international humanitarian law, it is the consistent position of the UN Human Rights Office that their use in populated areas is incompatible with fundamental principles of international humanitarian law. And I'm going to say thanks to Charles for this, because he sent me through this from the UK Manual on National Rules of Engagement. And it quotes here, calling for fire support. UK personnel engaged in multinational operations are able to continue to call for fire support using current procedures, even knowing that support may come from non-state parties in the form of cluster munitions. So that's that. And then from CSIS, the Centre for Strategic and International Studies, making the point that that the cluster munitions agreements are signed by 123 nations, came into effect in 2010, but that Russia, Ukraine, and the United States have not signed the convention. And so perhaps that explains why the Department of Defense Law of War manual that we talked about last week does authorize the use of cluster munitions, amongst other things. Now, Politico here reporting that France has deepened military ties with Germany and Poland. So another trilateral defense agreement done, this time between France, Germany and Poland. Now, of course, the problem here is that there's a snap election being called in France, so we see how that stands up following that. But this follows on from the report we did a couple of weeks ago on military mobility and PESCO and so on, and the fact that a whole raft of European countries, 22 EU member states, have signed the agreement on military mobility. And this is all about getting effectively US and British arms and personnel from the west coast of Europe to the east coast in order to do battle with Russia. I say that with tongue in cheek because they'll get annihilated if they try it. But anyway, in the meantime, the wonderful Hamish de Bretton Gordon has been up to his old tricks again. His headline in the Telegraph, once again, we're getting the Telegraph in as many times as possible today. Putin's nuclear arsenal is crumbling. Ukraine can take it out for good, is what he's claiming. So therefore, we don't need to worry. We can just go ahead and use nuclear weapons against Russia if we choose to do so. But in the meantime, what's Russia's response to this? Well, it is revising its nuclear doctrine, according to Dmitry Peskov here, as reported by Reuters. So this an extremely dangerous situation. The fact is, this is not an issue which is an election issue, as far as I can see at this point, aside from the comments that Farage may have made a few days ago. I think this needs to be an issue for the election. So I think everybody needs to be getting out there and making it an issue for the election. And that's what I would encourage. Okay, where does that take us then? After